This video is brought to you by PrizePicks. Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome to QnA, the show where I take your questions and answer them here in video format. A ton of questions to get into, so let's just jump into it. First question starts from Not Stand For Real. Says, hey, Q, what is your worst case scenario for this upcoming draft? We always hear what we want the Browns not to do, but whatever they shouldn't do. Also, is bringing back Nick Chubb an option? I don't think they're going to bring back Nick Chubb. I would like it to happen, and I do think it's something that they could do if they wanted to, but it doesn't seem like there's energy to do it internally for the Browns. But so we're talking about worst case scenarios for the Browns. I don't know. Like, usually a worst case scenario for me is pretty easy to cook up because it's pretty obvious for whatever draft year it is. This year's been a little bit different. There's not much that I feel like super strong about in the positive direction that the Cleveland Browns need to do. Like, I don't think there's somebody that is just blinking at number 6 that they need to take. You know, I don't feel that strongly about it. I am fine with the trade back and fine with a lot of different outcomes from the trade back. You know, I'm not really dead set on one or two prospects. And as far as like taking a player at 6, there's not a lot of players that I feel in the inverse that negatively about that I would like hate the pick there. So I don't really know what my worst case scenario is right now. I've been thinking about it a lot. It would probably be like if they went Caden Proctor 6. I think that's like a reach. He's not a tackle. It's kind of like the Siaki Ika bet, but worse, because like with Siaki Ika, the whole bet was, oh, we're going to turn a dump truck into a Ferrari and get this guy to lose weight. But Siaki Ika was like a 3rd round pick. You know what I mean? Doing that with like the number 6 pick is just like way worse. So maybe that's my worst case scenario, is that they go like Caden Proctor at 6. Not a big fan of that. Not in general a big fan of let's take giant tackle, have him lose weight, and see if we can make him better. Just because like that just doesn't historically. I mean, we're living with that with DeJuan Jones, where like DeJuan just hasn't worked out for us in that way. So it's probably that, but even then, I don't know if I'm like crashing out over it. Like, I don't think there's a lot of scenarios where I crash out about what the Browns do in the early part of the first round or with their second pick in the first round. I'm pretty open to a lot of different scenarios that can work out, if I'm being honest. The next one comes from C. Andre Howard, who says this draft seems to have a lot of older prospects that will be about 23 or 24 on game day. Do you think Andrew Berry will relax his age guardrails a bit this year, or will he continue to target younger players with high upside but maybe lower floors? Well, let's really think about this. You know, like we tend to just like assume because a player is older that the floor is higher, or that a player is younger that the floor is lower. I think that's kind of bullshit, if I'm being honest. I think that framing is just wrong. I think a player who is older has just as low, or, you know, has the same probability to have a bad floor as a young player. And I think a young player who's produced earlier probably has a higher floor than somebody who's 25 and wasn't productive until they were 25, right? Like, Harold Fannon's a great example of this. Harold Fannon was super productive, and he was super productive at like 20 years old. You look at other prospects, and they weren't productive until they were 23, 24, 25. If you ask me, I think the guy who has a lower floor is the guy who is better younger, because they were able to produce at a high level despite being at a physical disadvantage because they were younger players than most of the guys they were playing with in college. That guy has a higher floor to me than somebody who produced when they're older. So I don't know if I really buy in on this framework that the older players have higher floors. I think you need those, like, in order for those guys to make sense, that's the kind of framework that you need to believe in. But I think a young player who's productive, I think the productivity of a player and what they were able to do in their tape kind of provides their floor more than their age. And I think that's why the Browns target younger players, is because they want young players who are productive. And look at every young player that they've gone after. These are young, productive players, not just young guys, right? I think that's the part that people miss, right? I've heard people talk about the David Bailey, Ruben Bain debate for the Browns. I think the Browns are much more likely to go after Ruben Bain because despite the fact that measurables aren't what you would want from an analytically focused team, the production and age combination is, right? For Ruben Bain versus like a David Bailey, who's a bit older and was productive later in his college career. So the production with the age, I think, is the important part that the Browns look for. They want young, productive football players. Think Francis Mauigoa, think Ruben Bain, think Caleb Downs, guys who are younger but still very productive. That's the kind of prospect that Andrew Berry loves. And I think there's a good reason behind that. Those guys do provide pretty solid floors. Kayla says this: do you think there is more debate than usual about who the best left tackle and wide receiver is? The debate seems clearer on safety or edge. Maybe if we can't trade down, those are the positions you can take to ensure value in the first round. Appreciate you. I don't know if there's really that much debate about best wide receiver, best tackle. I think the answer for wide receiver is more contextual, right? Because there's a lot of people that Carnell Tate's going to make sense to. And if you're just looking at this from a 30,000-foot view, I think Carnell Tate feels like the safest one because he has that Ohio State branding on him and he doesn't have any physical red flags on him, right? Like with Mekhi Lemon, size, very, very much a concern there. With Jordan Tyson, health, Carnell Tate doesn't have those things, and he went to Ohio State, right? So more people are more comfortable with the idea of taking him at wide receiver. I don't know if that necessarily means he's like the best prospect. I think there's some debate to be had there. But let me get back to the question here. If we can't trade down, are those the positions? So safety and edge? I think so. I think at 6, it's likely that Caleb Downs is there, and there's a chance that Ruben Bain is there. And I think if the Browns do go best player available, those guys will be a factor. But if you look at who the Browns have brought in on visits, they're bringing in guys on visits that are more adjacent to a team picking 12 than a team picking 6, which is something, right? Like they haven't really brought in the top prospects for visits, which is, I think, interesting. All right, we're going to get to the next question, but first, let me thank my sponsor, PrizePicks. Hey, let me talk to you about my sponsor for this year, PrizePicks. It's a fun way to win cash while you're watching your favorite teams. Forget complex betting rules. Their app is designed to be incredibly easy to use. Just pick more or less on a few player stats and lock in your lineup. Speaking of, here are my picks for this upcoming NFL season. They have Myles Garrett at 14 sacks here. I think he will get more than 14 sacks. Joe Burrow at 3,875 passing yards. I think he'll be a 4,000-yard passer. I'm going to go with more. They have Derrick Henry at 1,224 yards. I'm going to go less than that. Check to see if PrizePicks is available in your state. You can follow me on the app at KWEN_C to see all of my lineups. Download the PrizePicks app today. Play $5 and get $50 in lineups when you download the app using the link in the description. We're back. First question back is from Sad, who says, Q, what is the point? What point does improving this team defensively from where they are now not help them win games in the short term? Are we close to this point? How much of an effect does this have on Andrew Berry's drafting strategy? I ask this because I think of how fun it would be to get downs on defense. Then I remember how painful it was to watch the offense last season. Love your work as always. So one thing to keep in mind, right? If Andrew Berry is staying consistent to what he's done as general manager of the Cleveland Browns, he does not really view the draft, especially when you're in the stage of a team that the Cleveland Browns are in, where you're not winning right now. He doesn't view the draft as a short-term solution. He views the draft as a long-term game, right? So that's why he will draft a Mason Graham. When there are other positional fits that might have made more sense for the short term, like a Ted McMillan, you can argue Armand Medbu, right? He thinks that Mason Graham's going to be the best player over a long period of time. That's what the Browns' focus is in the draft. And if they take anybody defensively, I think that that's why they would do that. Yeah, it could help him in the short term, but the draft is about the long-term picture of the team. And getting a safety might not be the thing that helps them win a bunch of games this year, but it could be what carries over continuity for this defense if you were to trade Myles Garrett in a couple of years to where you could still be an excellent defense but not have your best player. That's kind of where some of the thinking would be. Not exclusively tied to a Myles Garrett trade or anything like that, but it's about being able to maintain an identity or a pillar for this team over the long run, where it's like, hey, the defense can be resilient. It's not all reliant on one player being successful or Denzel Ward. You know what I mean? So I think that if we're trying to look at what the Browns are going to do, it's more useful to look at the long term than worry about what the short term gain of this is, because everything that they've done, especially in the first two rounds, has been long-term focus, except for 2020, where they felt like they were closer to being a championship team. Danny says this: with the new offensive line and questions at quarterback, how realistic is it that Harold Fannin Jr. To have a Pro Bowl season? He showed plenty of promise in his rookie season, but are there too many cards stacked against him? Not really. I mean, like, if we're talking about a Pro Bowl season for a tight end, we're probably talking about, 750 to 800 yards, probably double-digit touchdowns. I think that's well in the cards or possible for Harold Fannin to have if the Browns get better quarterback play or if the Browns get better offensive line play. So, yeah, I think that's a possibility to aim for with Harold Fannin. I don't think that's crazy to think could happen. Mike Burkholder says this: I think we have a hidden gem with Dylan Sampson. Instead of drafting or signing a free agent, how can the head coach best utilize the two running backs that we have already rostered? I think it's going to be really determined for Dylan Sampson on his ability to pass block. I think that's what's been holding him back from getting the snaps, the carries that he wants. It's not that he's not willing or that his technique is terrible. It's just he's not strong enough. He's very young. He's the youngest player in the league last year. He's not going to be after the draft this year, but he will be the youngest player of his draft class. So it's excusable for him not to be there strength-wise, and it might take a couple of years, but that's what they're waiting on, right? He needs to be strong enough to hold up in pass protection so he can get on the field more. That's what's holding him back. The next one is from Harrison, who says, thoughts on a trade for Will Levis? Feels like he hasn't been talked about at all. I'll be honest. Will Levis is not a name I get excited about. I think I would still want to start Shedeur over him. I think the usefulness for Will Levis would be that there's an extra body between him, Shedeur, and Dylan Gabriel and Deshaun Watson, right? He would be the worst quarterback you can get that at least won't get booed immediately by the fan base if he's here. I think it's still along the lines of like a Kenny Pickett. Like I don't know how useful he's going to be for you throughout the season, but I think they need to add one to the room, and I guess Will Levis is better than adding a quarterback in like the 5th round this year. You know, it's better than drafting a quarterback, I guess. I will say this though. If the Browns get Will Levis, this will be the Mel Kiper quarterback dream draft room, because he's been like big on the Shador thing, right? And he was huge on the Will Levis thing when Will Levis came out. So it'd be interesting to see what Mel Kiper's reaction would be if the Browns traded for Will Levis, given like how hard he went for Will Levis when Will Levis came into the draft. It was similarly as hard as he went for Shador. I wonder if that would put him in an awkward spot. But outside of that, I mean, like the most he could be is probably another body in that quarterback room that can go out there and not be Deshaun or Dillon, which, I mean, has some value to the Cleveland Browns, I would think. In your opinion, this is from Dominic, who says, in your opinion, right at this moment, what would a fair trade for Myles Garrett look like for the Browns, even if it's unrealistic? It would be 3 first-round picks. I would probably want 2 day 2 picks. It doesn't have to be 2 second-round picks, but I would probably want 3 first, 2 day 2 picks, and a starter on their rookie deal still. So let's imagine, yeah, like that's what I would want. You know, if this was the Eagles, 3 first-round picks, 2 day 2 picks, and Quinyon Mitchell. You know what I mean? It would be something along that. I want to leave here with a lot. That's what a fair trade for. That's what a trade for Myles would look like, that I would be like, all right, they extracted as much as they could. I don't know if it would be fair value because you're trading one of the best players of his generation. So I don't know if there's fair value you can get for that, but it would at least be enough to where I'm like, okay, this isn't going to destroy the Browns completely, having to dig out from this. The next one from King Yada says this. Hey, what would your dream ideal combination be for the Browns' first 3 picks? Mine would be Freeling, McNeil Warren, and Chris Bell. Chris Bell is a player I really hope the Browns draft. I like Chris Bell a lot. McNeil Warren, I like him a lot. I like Monroe Freeling at tackle. So I like this combination here. There is one where I'm like, hey, what if they get radical with the wide receivers and just like go all out on solving it? And they go Monroe Freeling, Mekhi Lemon, Chris Bell? I don't think I would hate that. I think draft experts would hate it. I think draft Twitter would clown it. But I think that would be fine. Because then you add 2 big elements to that wide receiver room and you get your left tackle. I think that would be pretty strong. But that's just my opinion there. But that's my thoughts. Let me know your thoughts down in the comment section below. Thank you for asking these questions. Y'all have a great day. Have an even better night. Peace.